Hello, and thank you very much for coming along. Today we're going to look at global climate regime change and the Nigerian elections, macro and micro history, understanding the rising tide of worldwide social, economic, and political upheaval. You'll remember that this was part of a larger series of programs on global climate change in Africa, the enduring legacies of colonialism, and the coming perfect storms for the continent. We looked in the past and we're situating the current thought about Nigeria in the context of global climate change across the whole continent of Africa and, in fact, across the whole surface of the earth. The Nigerian elections were particularly important in this regard. They've just taken place in 2023. They need to be understood as part of a nested series of processes, nested within their own history and their own social economic background, but also nested within a whole series of global cycles and rhythms that are now being very apparent to all but the very deaf and the very blind. In part one, we looked at the whole question of these larger shifts. But now we're going to situate it, especially in relation to sea level rise, in the Nigerian micro history instance of the elections. We'll be looking then in part two at particularities of the elections and how they do or do not understand the larger dynamics at work in the global system. We're going to look at this respect in the nested significance of the 2023 Nigerian elections. We'll look in the first instance at the election candidates, the election results, and the post-election disputes that are currently underway, not yet resolved. Then we'll look at the next nested context of these elections, the Nigerian context. We'll look at Nigerian headline stories and reactions, both to circumstances in Nigeria and to the elections themselves. Then we'll look at Africa-wide questions and the importance of the Nigerian elections for the whole continent. Beyond that, we'll look at the global socio-political significance of the elections. These reach far beyond just the continent of Africa, as we'll see. So, we're going to look at the Nigerian elections as well in reference to the future macro historical significance that they are going to have. They reveal something very important about the human prospect in the coming decades and centuries. In effect, we're experiencing the global climate regime as a very dramatic case of changing rapidly and radically. The big question before the entire human community, not just the Nigerian electorate or its candidates or its winners and losers, but the whole human community, is whether humankind can respond quickly enough to the global climate regime change that is now upon us all. So the future of the macro historical significance of the Nigerian elections is crucial for anyone on Earth. To start then, let's look at the elections themselves. In the Nigerian presidential election, there were three major candidates from the APC, PDP, and LP. The results were announced by the government, and they came out to being 36.6% for the APC candidate, 29% for the PDP candidate, and 25% for the Labour Party candidate. Instantly, almost instantly, certainly shortly after the results were announced, Peter Obi, candidate from the Labour Party, said he will prove that he won the Nigerian election. This, he said on an interview taped on Al Jazeera English, went around the world. And he then proceeded to formally challenge the election results. All of these things are recorded, and you can pick up the recordings of them from Transition Studies. If they have a little indication down below, it means they're on the website at transition-studies.net. This one too appeared and indicates very quickly that there's a big difference of opinion that emerges within Nigeria after the elections as to who actually won and who was not being fairly treated in the vote count. Bola Tinubu formally won the election, but he's being challenged, and not insignificantly, he's being challenged particularly in the social media. Various kinds of very quick responses emerge from the social media, in this case, the Evening Standard within Nigeria. And that level of communication is instantaneous across the country, far more quickly than any official publication or even the announcement from radio stations or TV stations of results. Social media has become a factor itself in the elections process. Let's take a look at the Nigerian elections as they are reflected in the social media. For example, people are portrayed very quickly by their opponents or by their advocates, and we get a very heightened sense of the conflict that emerged in the election and is expressed after it. Let's look.
This guy, Bola Tinubu, has just won Nigeria's election. He won it with just 37% of the vote and is a hugely divisive figure in Nigeria. President Tinubu was a former governor of Lagos, where he earned a reputation over the years as a political godfather, as he influenced the success and failure of multiple people's careers. Because of this, he is often called Jagaban by his supporters, meaning big boss. But to many others, he represents corruption, and at 70 years old, though this is disputed, many see him as just too old and incoherent for the job. They call him Balablu, after a speech where he tried to say hullabaloo, and instead said Balablu. Tinubu has been after the presidency for years, and campaigned using the slogan, "It's my turn." Opposition candidates have refused to accept defeat, claiming the election was rigged.
Well, so much for Bola Tinubu from what was published in the Evening Standard. It's not clear, in fact, that there is an equal and opposite representation among the other parties. But it's very important to recognize that whatever sense of grievance may be present in any one social media representation like this one, other social media outlets can carry different messages very quickly, very powerfully. And rather than letting the results of an election subside and people becoming more united in the common sense of their common purpose after the election, the social media can in fact be a very divisive force in some cases, tearing apart the social fabric, depending upon what the previous problems were prior to the election. It's an open question how social media will respond collectively in the Nigerian case, but it's being watched all over the world for that reason. Let's look then at why the Nigerian election is considered important in the context of the wider African circumstance. This has been answered again in a webcast, in a sense, prior to the election, because The Economist in London published a very crucial article about why Nigeria is crucial to democracy in Africa. Not just why these elections are crucial to democracy in Nigeria, but why Nigeria is crucial to democracy in Africa. Let's have a look.
Nigeria is Africa's powerhouse, the continent's largest economy, its most populous country, with a cultural influence on the rest of the world.
What happens in Nigeria has significant effects across its borders.
It's also Africa's largest democracy. But that democracy is at risk.
The stakes cannot be higher. To reverse the trend of democratic deterioration,
And if Africa's most influential democracy stumbles, the results could be grim for the entire continent. But Nigeria has youth on its side.
Demography will be the game changer.
In Nigeria and across Africa, young people are demanding more of their governments. So what can the politics of Nigeria's younger generation tell us about the state of democracy on the continent? And where it might be headed? It's Friday morning, and Mustafa is getting ready for school. He lives in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, in northeastern Nigeria.
Ibrahim ka fito mu tafi mana. Time na makaranta yi. Wai da mu je mu jira boss a can gudun sai mu tafi. Good morning everyone.
For most of Mustafa's 14 years, this area has been a hotbed of violence. Today, life in this corner of Maiduguri seems calm. But while Mustafa's school might look ordinary, appearances can be deceiving.
Nigerian great nation right now and forever.
Every one of the 2,000 pupils at this school has been directly affected by terrorism. Like many of his friends, Mustafa was orphaned by jihadist group Boko Haram. He was 9 years old.
I will never forget that day that I lost my parents. Two strangers came into our house. We had gunshot. They have killed both of my parents.
Boko Haram isn't the only threat to Nigeria's security. Large parts of the country have become practically lawless. Kidnapping now affects everyone from wealthy city dwellers to rural school children. As the government struggles to contain not just kidnappers, but bandits, insurgents, and separatists, it's little wonder that many Nigerians are losing faith in their politicians.
If a government is no longer able to provide security, it's beginning to lose. The people who should protect democracy are no longer interested in democracy if it cannot secure their lives and property.
When two nearby countries, Mali and Burkina Faso, failed to deal with insurgents, they suffered military coups. Few expect anything similar to happen in Nigeria, but the causes of its chronic instability run deep.
Kidnapping is a billion-naira industry in Nigeria. It is driven by, in many ways, the economic situation of most young people and the lack of opportunities and lack of jobs.
Youth unemployment has reached 19.6%, and more than 30% of the population live on less than $1.90 per day. Nigeria has oil, but it has not brought prosperity. Instead, it fuels corruption. many politicians seek office to get rich and will do almost anything to win. From stirring up ethnic tension to handing out cash on election day.
The buying and selling of votes is quite a common feature of Nigeria's politics. If you think about the short-term gain a person is receiving in one transaction in selling their votes, compared to, say, earning that kind of money over the course of a month, the incentives are really, really strong for an individual to sell their vote.
It's estimated that some 18% of residents of Nigeria's northeast were offered money or a gift for their vote in 2019. Countrywide, that figure rose to 21%.
Vote markets are quite common in a number of African democracies, but also in Latin America and across Asia. Vote selling corrodes democracy very much from the inside, because at the very inception of this relationship between citizens and the state, you have corruption at the heart of it.
I'm Jonathan Rosenthal, the Africa editor at The Economist. If you'd like to read more of our Africa coverage, why not take out a subscription to The Economist? You'll receive daily and weekly updates on global affairs, and you can read us online and in the app, as well as get our audio edition. For the very best offers, click on the link below. And now, back to the film.
Nigeria's current president, Muhammadu Buhari, is 80 years old, and he's running a country with an average age of 18. The failure of older leaders to curb corruption has led to simmering frustrations among young voters. But the erosion of democracy has sparked a fight back from the country's youth. And leading the charge is Nigeria's thriving startup scene. When the shooting of a young man by the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, sparked widespread protests, it was Nigeria's startup leaders who stepped up to help the campaign.
Being private sector and being removed from kind of the patronage systems that control our politics, Nigeria's tech startups have been central to fueling a lot of the political activism we've seen in Nigeria.
The analysis for the space company, the goal here is to understand how space companies are performing.
Temidayo Onoshun is MD of Space in Africa, a startup that consults with the African space industry and governments across the continent.
I think the NSAS protest influenced a lot of things. We're seeing that we cannot trust people in government to make smart decisions for us. I think a lot of startups played key roles during the NSAS protest. Some donated money. We also had some, people working in certain startups actually getting involved in some of the organizations that were providing support for people that were physically protesting.
The protests ended suddenly when soldiers opened fire on demonstrators at Lekki tollgate. SARS was disbanded, but many protesters were still furious, and police violence remains incredibly high. The protests had shown, however, that young Nigerians would continue to demand to be heard. And in the run-up to the 2023 general election, there has been a surge of young people registering to vote. The country's Electoral Commission registered nearly 10 million new voters. Over 3/4 of them were under 35 years old. They're reaching a critical mass, where they can translate those numbers into influence. And some have gone further. Aisha Nyako is 31 years old. She was born and raised in Maiduguri. Last year, she joined the Young Progressives, a grassroots party launched specifically to give a voice to young Nigerians. Now she is running to be Maiduguri's council representative at the State House of Assembly. Today, Aisha is meeting potential voters at a camp for internally displaced people, where many struggle to find work. Aisha understands their frustrations. Trying to make ends meet as a single mother led to her own political awakening.
I have not been employed. I have been going off and down to different states. I need to go to Abuja. I need to go to Kaduna, all in the name of seeking for a job. So my own story is part of why I said, let me contest.
Aisha is part of a growing trend in Nigerian politics. Young voters are demanding candidates who will serve those historically ignored by the political process.
What about those women that are not educated and they have no way to get source of income? I'm running for this office to end poor representation.
Messages like this are hitting home.
Young people now recognize that they are a formidable lot. They could actually make the change that is needed to change any of the dominant party or voting any candidate of their choice.
In Nigeria's 2023 presidential election, students and first-time voters helped to fire up the campaign of this man.
What you lack is leadership. This one wasted everybody's time. I plan your future. And every Nigeria will be led by a leader that understands what the problem is.
At 61, Peter Obi might seem an unlikely leader for the young, but his promise to fight corruption and move beyond ethnic politics has struck a chord with the younger generation.
The youth want a leadership that is responsive to the problem of insecurity. The money we need to invest in education, the money we need to invest in health, the money to pull people out of poverty are being stolen by people.
But in a political system where the two main parties have deep pockets, decades of experience, and few scruples, Obi faces an uphill struggle to win. It's not just in Nigeria where young people are trying to hold governments to account. Africa has some of the longest-serving leaders in the world, several of whom have been in power for longer than most of their people have been alive. Many young Africans think their rulers are out of touch and self-serving. In Uganda, protesters recently demanded an end to corruption. They're not the only ones.
Togo went for almost 1 year. Young people actually held protests against the Nyasigwe regime.
Protesters in Ghana have called on their president to step down over mismanagement of the country's economic crisis.
There are so many social movements spearheaded by young people in West Africa and Africa as a whole, holding governments to account.
Back in Maiduguri, activists like Aisha are hoping to channel young people's political awakening into change at the ballot box. Demography may be on Africa's side, but there's no guarantee the demands of the young will be satisfied. Enthusiasm could well give way to disillusion. Young Africans literally cannot afford to give up.
There are significant barriers to change in Nigeria. The economic hardship that Nigerians are going through. In the last 6 years, government revenues have been down. Insecurity has become increasingly widespread. But on the flip side, there seems to be a sense of urgency, expediency, that these issues need to be addressed now. There is no opportunity for delaying on any of these challenges.
It's arguably the world's biggest floating slum, and it's home to over 100,000 people, mainly fishermen, some of whom have lived here all their lives. Makoko is a multicultural community comprising mainly the Egun people with connection to both Nigeria and Benin Republic, and the Yoruba people of southwest Nigeria.
According to our forefathers, Makoko community started in the year 1919, but was born here in September 13, 1958.
1958.
Makoko is our gift from God. God decided to gift us the very poor in the society. We live a communal life and share whatever we have among ourselves.
Life in Makoko is difficult, and the people here struggle daily. Poverty remains widespread.
We don't have any government establishments, any government, anything that shows that we are in this country of Nigeria. We don't have anything. Water, we don't have it. Light, no school, and no hospital at all.
Despite all these challenges, life in Makoko is relatively peaceful, and the people are generally happy. Dugout canoes are the main means of commuting around the community. Students who go to school do so on canoes. So do petty traders who sell everything from fruits to cooked food, and they do so paddling themselves.
Look at the boy who's paddling. Look at this. Look at the boys who are in charge. I mean, this is really funny. So these guys are the ones paddling the canoe. They are the ones taking these children home. And this is interesting.
The huge number of canoes around means they bump into each other and cause the kind of traffic jam you find on Lagos roads. The makeshift houses in the community are built on stilts, and despite their appearance, the structures are organized and create a maze of waterways that make navigation easier for canoes. But there are no conventional toilets here. Residents simply dump their waste into the lagoon. In one of the few private schools in the community, a lesson is underway. However, the school is poorly equipped. It's an open building with only 2 writing boards for all the classes. Almost all the schools here are like this one. The roofs are giving way.
There are about 250 children in the school, and they all learn under this roof. So from kindergarten to primary 6, all of them learn under one roof. Most times when the teachers are teaching, the teachers in various classes are teaching, they hear themselves. And when it rains, classes will have to stop.
The school fees, we are just asking for 50-50 naira per student. They are not paying. They are not paying. Some cannot afford uniforms, even shoes. We are sending them at home to go and buy shoes. The parents say they do not get money to buy shoes for the student, the children.
Life in Makoko may be peaceful, but the people here have lived under constant threat of forced eviction by the government for over a decade.
We live in fear. We are scared that we might be forced from our homes. The possibility gives us sleepless nights, and we continue to plead with the government to leave us here. If we are forced to leave, where do we go to?
While they wait to see what action the government eventually takes, the people say their source of livelihood, fishing, is being threatened by sand dredging. They say this has led to a drop in their earnings.
Ever since the dredging began, the fishers have moved far from reach due to the sounds of the machine. Now we have to go to the outer sea before we can fish. It has really affected our means of livelihood. Before the dredging activities, we used to earn around 3,000 naira daily. But now, we manage to earn between 800 to 1,000 naira daily.
The people of Makoko are anxious about their future, even as they keep hoping for better days ahead.
Makoko is such a lovely place. Despite the pervasive poverty here, it's really lovely. The people here may be poor, but then they're happy. It's one thing you cannot take away from them. Whether they're selling things like this, and you have a lot of people like this here, or they're out there in the sea fishing, the people are always happy. But then there's a lot the government can do here to make this place more livable. Deji Badimasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Do you drink that water? No. But you use it to wash.
Echo Atlantic is a unique new city within a city that's being built on a vast area of land reclaimed from the ocean along the coast of Victoria Island in Lagos, Nigeria. More than 6.5 million square meters have so far been recovered from the sea, with an eventual footprint spreading across 10 square kilometers. The bold vision it represents is uncompromising: to become the future financial capital of Africa. Developed with skill and dedication, Echo Atlantic is raising the standard for quality of life in Nigeria. Aspirational, accessible, and built for success. The making of this remarkable city began in 2006, when the developers and city planners, South Energex Nigeria Limited, a subsidiary of the Shiguri Group, was granted permission to build a preliminary sea wall to protect Victoria Island from flooding. But Lagos state governors saw the merit in going much further than that. They implemented an ingenious idea to overcome 100 years of severe coastal erosion while building a new city on reclaimed land at the same time. The once devastated shoreline was not only repaired but re-established to where it once was, 1.5 miles offshore.
Today, a liability has been arrested and is being converted to a great asset of prosperity.
That great asset is here and now in Echo Atlantic. To make it happen, a second sea revetment, longer, wider, and much deeper, and now known as the Great Wall of Lagos, was essential if a new city to save the city of Lagos itself was to be constructed. Echo Atlantic was first propelled onto the world stage when the late Nigerian president, Umaru Yar'Adua, officially supported the project through his representative during a 2008 inauguration ceremony.
It's my singular honor and privilege to launch the Echo Atlantic City project.
The city is being developed by private financing, with the full backing of both the federal government and Lagos state government.
This is an opportunity to create a new and economically friendly environment, and Lagosians, Nigerians generally are people of very, very exotic taste.
The Great Wall is an 8.5 kilometers long sea barrier, the backbone and guardian of Echo Atlantic. Elaborate testing of its structural design was carried out to the highest standards in Europe. Precise scale modelling proved that the wall could withstand the worst storms expected in 1,000 years. The landfill behind the Great Wall is built up from a mixture of sand and water, which is harvested from the seabed and pumped into target areas, creating about 8,000 square meters of new land every day at full capacity. Not only that, the land self-compacts, making it ideal for construction. In early 2013, at the halfway stage of land reclamation, Echo Atlantic was praised by the former presidents of Nigeria and the United States of America.
The project is a great example of partnership to transform land
lost to erosion into a delightful ocean city.
And it will help to diversify the economy of Nigeria, to brand Lagos all over the world, and to create an enormous number of opportunities.
Echo Atlantic holds a place of pride for Nigeria. It is a global city of world-class design and international recognition.
We are on land that has been reclaimed as an asset of prosperity. Today we are at a turning point where the real construction of the city has started. Nigeria is a land of opportunity.
Since then, Echo Atlantic's network of carefully planned infrastructure has been put in place on land so far recovered. Street lighting has also been installed for existing roads and is brilliantly illuminating the night sky. In 2016, Echo Atlantic saw its very first residential tower officially opened and occupied. Called the Black Pearl, it's one of a cluster of 5 magnificent buildings. The first jewel in the Echo Atlantic crown, standing at 24 floors, offering a luxurious lifestyle, an investment by Echo Pearl Development.
The Echo Atlantic project, portends to provide over 350,000 jobs when completed. Beyond the fact that it's going to grow the GDP of Lagos, it only means that other investors will draw from the confidence that the investors have put in that project to continue to grow the economy of Lagos.
Not least for investors in Africa's preeminent development project, which is destined to become a crucial part of Nigeria's drive to become a global top 20 economy. If seeing is believing, Echo Atlantic has it all. But it's not until you actually set foot on the solid ground here that the enormity of what's already been achieved can be fully understood and appreciated from all perspectives. Indeed, Echo Atlantic's district planning showcases the best of urban design with an impressive mix of residential and commercial developments. There are more than 10 kilometers of stunning waterfront promenade, while boutiques, restaurants and recreational destinations will create ideal conditions to live, work and play for residents and tourists alike. An international school will offer world-class education in a safe and comfortable setting. First-class healthcare is also an essential, so Echo Atlantic's International Hospital will ensure patients are well treated. And one of the largest shopping malls in sub-Saharan Africa will become a prime destination and icon of style. Life in Echo Atlantic will be exciting from the moment you enter this city. Running through this massive development all the way to the sea is Echo Boulevard here. The boulevard is also home to the business district, covering 700,000 square meters of premium real estate. When complete, Echo Atlantic will be a thriving international hub, driving the growth of Africa and establishing a vital new link to the world's economy.
Lagos is that new destination in Africa where investors should pay attention from 2017. And that's why we're ready to take on the world.
This city in the making attracts a constant stream of high-profile visitors and investors from all corners of the world. And through Echo Atlantic, they are focused on the growth potential of not only Lagos, but Africa as a whole. To that end, Echo Atlantic is a designated free zone under a federal government initiative. A vital addition for investors who want to live or conduct business within the city. There's so much more to Echo Atlantic than creating top-class and much-needed residential, tourist and business space in one of the world's fastest-growing cities. Strategically, Echo Atlantic's smart planning connects all neighbourhoods with major transport routes. Throughout the city, modern and efficient public transport will be integrated with the Lagos waterways to ensure free-flowing movement. An independent water supply, power grid and sewage network ensure the city can efficiently serve the growing needs of its population. city power will be provided by a dedicated power plant. And Echo Atlantic's fibre optic network will be second to none. Additionally, to cope with Nigeria's heavy rainfall, a dependable system of stormwater drainage was put in place, extending some 30 kilometers under the city so far. Echo Atlantic is a colossal task in every way imaginable, and the ambitious vision is now a visible reality. There's much more to see than infrastructure and these rising towers. The developers began growing over 200,000 trees for Echo Atlantic back in 2010, so that the cosmetics of making the city attractive could be ready in good time. When complete, the ongoing citywide maintenance and monitoring will be provided by independent service companies to ensure safe and smooth operations 24/7. Echo Atlantic's bridges, 14 in all, for its roads and additional tunnels for waterways are finished in areas where land has been reclaimed. Carefully planned road systems and pedestrian zones will keep the city congestion-free. Meanwhile, the city's internal waterway system is also taking shape. Preliminary work is substantially complete, meaning that the release of water into the canals is already being planned and prepared. The Azuri Peninsula development is situated in the elegant Marina district and combines the tranquility of the waterfront alongside a sophisticated, pedestrian-friendly centre. The heart of this exclusive yachting marina will be its community, the residents, the businesses based here, and of course the visitors and tourists who will be able to enjoy the best of coastal attractions. At the main entrance to Echo Atlantic lies Echo Energy Estate, which is setting a new standard for residential developments tailor-made for the energy sector. Even as it grows, Echo Atlantic has sprung into life through groundbreaking social and sporting events. Africa's first ever beach polo tournament was born here and drew large crowds to the signature tournament. Echo Atlantic hosts the Lagos Marathon and is now an annual fixture for Copa Lagos, the popular televised international beach soccer tournament watched by millions. As Echo Atlantic reaches out to more and more Nigerians, so too does its reputation and appeal for investment and commercial success. Now is the time to take part in the development of this bold and exciting venture. Discover a city like no other. It is one of a kind. Brent Sadler, Echo Atlantic, Lagos, Nigeria.
Lagos is currently the largest city in Nigeria, and by the end of the century, it could be the largest in the world. What was once a small coastal town has today exploded into a megacity with a population of 15 million, which, get this, is set to double by 2050. And usually when cities turn into megacities, there's better infrastructure and economic opportunities for the people. But in developing countries, it can also end up making the rich richer and the poor even worse off. We can also see this in Mumbai, for example. Home to over 21 million people, it's considered the financial capital of India, with tall skyscrapers, long highways, and thriving industries. But it's also the city that houses one of the biggest slums in the world, where people have little access to basic facilities like water and sanitation. Today, 2/3 of the population in Lagos live below the poverty line. The city also struggles with a high crime rate, an inefficient public transport system, and an impact on natural resources due to climate change. To tackle this, though, the government of Lagos has come up with this: a 30-year plan to make Lagos Africa's model megacity and transform it into something that they call an ultra-modern economic destination. Right now, all eyes are on Lagos, because if they manage to achieve this, it could be the start of a new era of urbanization in Africa. And today we're going to find out what this city could look like. Turns out one of the biggest reasons behind this is a youth bulge, where more people between 15 and 29 years of age move from rural areas to cities, seeking new job opportunities, bigger markets for business, and better living conditions. In fact, Africa is the youngest continent in the world, with just a median age of 19. And honestly, this could be a great shift for the people because cities hold a lot of economic power. 10% of Nigeria's total GDP of more than $400 billion is generated in Lagos alone. It's also considered Africa's startup capital and is gradually becoming the tech hub of the country, with companies like Google and Microsoft headquartered in the city. Over the years, the city has developed 2 seaports, local and international airports, and several industrial areas, resulting in Lagos becoming the center of Nigeria's social and economic activity. But the growth hasn't really been able to keep up with the rise of Lagos's population, which is exactly when an urban divide starts to build in megacities. Today, Lagos houses more than 7% of Nigeria's population, but more than 2/3 of the people in Lagos state live in informal housing, including several in slum areas. Most facilities in these areas are either basic services like water and sewage and are often controlled by private companies that overcharge, because of which people can barely afford it. More than half the population here live in something called Face Me, I Face You housing, which has so little space that people share the same room while sleeping back to back or face to face. Public transport is hardly functioning and mainly consists of these minivans and motorcycle taxis. In fact, on average, Lagos residents spend more than 1,500 hours in traffic annually, whilst people in LA, for example, which is a city known for awful congestion and traffic jam, spend just 128. The city of Lagos also has the smallest landmass in Nigeria, making it very difficult to accommodate for a growing population and their need for infrastructure. In fact, poor drainage systems are partly responsible for recurring floods like these.
People face a lot of stress because of the road. So I normally take boats every day in order to get to office on time.
The truth of the matter is that the government is trying, but it's not at the stage we want Lagos State to be. People living in slums area or in the lower class area, they don't normally dispose their waste because they cannot afford it. So they prefer putting it inside the gutter so that the water will carry it during the rainfall, carrying it to the lagoon, thereby polluting the lagoon, the water that's supposed to be enjoying it.
After I heard the people of Lagos talk about their problems, ironically, I came across this report, which told me that Lagos is Nigeria's wealthiest city, holding $97 billion of total private wealth, which doesn't sound like the same city that these people were talking about. At this point, I had to find out, why isn't more money being spent on the city, and does the government even have any plans to improve it?
We're focusing on 20 strategic areas that will drive this very deep ambition.
In October of 2022, Executive Governor of Lagos State announced a 30-year plan to make Lagos Africa's model megacity. The Lagos State Development Plan of 2052 focuses on 4 objectives: economy, infrastructure, governance, and building a human-centric city. With over 400 initiatives, each task is assigned to a specific ministry and classified into 4 categories, starting with quick wins to long-term development. And the big focus of this plan is to create high-value jobs over the next 30 years and expand into sectors like trade and manufacturing, building more tech ecosystems, and even contributing to the growing film industry in Nigeria, Nollywood. At first glance, the plan looks great, but implementing it would require strong leadership and lots of money. And there seems to be a lack of funds, not just in Lagos, but in Nigeria as a whole. To make up for its gap in infrastructure, Nigeria needs an estimated $3 trillion by 2050. So where are they going to get that? One of the ways in which it's securing these funds is by borrowing them primarily from China.
Nigeria is determined to attract foreign direct investment.
We value the relationship
and has pledged its support for One China.
Nigeria.
China has been significantly investing in the country and has almost become an alternative to financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank. As of today, it's Nigeria's largest bilateral lender and is funding large projects including railways, hydroelectric power plants, and the rehabilitation of Nigeria's main 4 airports, one of which is in Lagos. And here's something that you're going to find interesting. The Nigeria-China trade in products increased from more than $1 billion in 2003 to nearly $14 billion in 2019. And in the same period, Nigeria's trade with the US declined from $11.5 billion to $7.5 billion. In fact, in 2018, the White House criticized the increasing influence of China in Africa and announced a new program called Prosper Africa to increase the trade and investment between the US and African countries. According to its website, the program has helped close to 1,000 deals, adding up to $65 billion in exports and investments. And the work is still ongoing. But the fact that this project was launched after China's increased investments in African markets makes me question the real purpose of Prosper Africa. Is it meant to grow African countries or to prevent China from growing too much in the region? The whole debate around whether China is on its way to financially colonizing Africa, as some have been putting it, is ongoing and a lot more complex to explain than in this one video. But Nigeria's dependency on borrowing to fund its infrastructure is quite clear. The country's total public debt crossed $100 billion in 2022. And what's truly shocking is that despite these numbers, Nigeria spends about 75% of its annual budget on civil servant salaries and other costs. In fact, Lagos State has higher tax revenue than any other in Nigeria, but most of this revenue is not even collected. So this is the plan on paper, but when you look on the ground about what's actually happening in the city, things don't look super good. The growth of Lagos's population is undisputed, but the new infrastructure and opportunities it will bring cannot be sustained if the people living below the poverty line are not included in this development plan. Does that mean that Lagos's version of being the ultra-modern economic destination is not possible? Not at all. What it needs is to expand its focus from just the rich to include all the different social groups that live within the city today. For example, when planning new residential projects, the city can't just be thinking about skyscrapers and luxury living. Solutions have to be built for low and mixed income groups, and sometimes this will take more effort because it doesn't just include constructing a building for them to live in. It includes creating equal educational resources and employment opportunities, which can then help them afford a better standard of living. Instead of modeling systems from developed countries that urbanize in a very different economic and environmental period, the city needs to identify its own strengths and build on them.
This guy, Bola Tinubu, has just won Nigeria's election. He won it with just 37% of the vote and is a hugely divisive figure in Nigeria. President Tinubu was a former governor of Lagos, where he earned a reputation over the years as a political godfather, as he influenced the success and failure of multiple people's careers. Because of this, he is often called Jagaban by his supporters, meaning big boss. But to many others, he represents corruption, and at 70 years old, though this is disputed, many see him as just too old and incoherent for the job. They call him Balablu, after a speech where he tried to say hullabaloo, and instead said Balablu. Tinubu has been after the presidency for years, and campaigned using the slogan, "It's my turn." Opposition candidates have refused to accept defeat, claiming the election was rigged.
Nigeria's opposition leader Peter Obi tells his supporters not to lose hope. The Labour Party leader insists he won Saturday's election and says he's going to court to challenge the results.
I'm not going away. I'll be at the forefront. We will walk through this darkness until day break.
Bola Tinubu of the governing All Progressives Congress was declared the winner by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. For now, the streets of the capital Abuja and many other parts of the country are calm as people wait for the court process to play out. Legal challenges have been launched before against the results of presidential elections in Nigeria, but none were successful. Many people are watching to see how independent the judiciary will be and what proof opposition parties say they have. Some people did not vote because of technical problems and a new biometric anti-fraud voter accreditation system.
Can INEC bring Nigerians who are experts, foreigners who are experts,
in election technology and tell us what happened on that day. You know, I think that's a major issue, and it's an issue of trust. Election is not about winning or losing. It's about trust and legitimacy.
Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation and the continent's biggest economy. Many people around the world are monitoring what happens next year. Harun Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Abuja.